7:30 p.m. Members of the council, we are in special legislative session. Are any amendments required? Let's start out with the agenda. Are any amendments required to this agenda? If whoever's controlling the screen could zoom out a little bit so we could see the rest of the agenda, that might be good. Are any changes required, and are there any conflicts of interest that any members need to disclose at this time? Sure don't see any microphones lit up.
I have none.
I don't see any hands held high, so I'm going to assume that's a no. So may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Siddiq to approve the agenda as submitted. Is there any discussion of the agenda? Are there any public comments on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Siddiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia.
Aye.
And did Councilmember Mayers make it? Doesn't look like it. So Councilmember Mayers is absent and I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. Councilmember Mayers had a work conflict this evening, but is going to try to join us later in the evening. Next item on the agenda is the swearing in of the election judges. So let me find a template for that. Do we have all of the election judges in attendance? I see Ms. Huberty and saw Ms. Smith. And the third one is Mr. Comstock. That's Mr. Comstock. Okay. Members of our election judges, please raise your hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Andre Huberty.
Can the other two judges please unmute so we can hear you?
I, Sheila Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Comstock.
Sorry, my laptop's messing up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. It said I was unmuted, but I'm not. I, Andrew Comstock,
Very good. Do swear or affirm
do swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I
that I
will
will
support
the Constitution of the United States
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
and that I will be
I
faithful
will be faithful and bear
and
true
bear
allegiance
Maryland,
to
to
the
the
state of
state of Maryland
support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without
partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of election judge
execute
the office of election judge
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Congratulations to all of you. Thank you. You are now sworn in as election judges. And I look forward to seeing you periodically during the day next Monday.
Thank you all.
Sounds good.
Please arrange to sign the documents as quickly as possible, and I will sign them myself as quickly as possible. Thank you again so much for helping make this election happen. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay. That brings us to the public comment section of the, the special legislative. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to legislative action items. Legislative action item number 1 is introduction of ordinance 2023-OR-06 regarding the fiscal year 2024 operating and CIP budget and tax rates. Would any member like to introduce this ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please do.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce ordinance 2023-OR-06. This is an ordinance concerning the fiscal year 2024 budget and tax rates, and this is for the purpose of adopting operating and capital budgets for the town of Riverdale Park for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. Be also for setting rates of real and personal property, as well as operating property taxation for the said fiscal year and levying such taxes. It also is for matters generally relating to the adoption of town budgets and levying of taxes and the setting of the tax rates for the town of Riverdale Park for the fiscal year as aforementioned, that being July 1, 2023 and ending on June 30, 2024.
Thank you, Councilmember. We do not generally discuss a piece of legislation as it is introduced. However, there will be discussion later this evening in the work session of amendments to the fiscal year 2023 budget. We'll discuss it again next week, and then it will be passed at a later time. So thank you very much for that introduction.
Welcome.
Moving on the agenda to legislative action item number 2. May I please have a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with AccuBuild Construction, Inc. for $993,963 for municipal center renovation CIP project number 18GG01.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak, sir?
Yes, I was hoping for a motion.
Oh, I just wanted to highlight, I believe it's for amount not to exceed 1.172876 that includes the contingency.
Thank you, sir. May I please have a motion to that effect from a member of the council?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Foe, second from Councilmember Smith to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with AccuBuild Construction, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $1,172,876 for municipal center renovation CIP project number 18GG01. Mr. Town Manager, do you want to say a few words about this?
I will ask Ms. Lewis to just to briefly bring the council up to date. I do want to commend her for her work in navigating some really difficult times. Director Lewis.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. That contingency amount, by the way, in dollar figures is $178,913. As we discussed with the council doing a recent update on the capital projects or capital improvement program projects, the 18-month delay in getting the building permits for the project caused the town to lose the company under contract. to build the improvements, requiring that the project be rebid. 4 companies submitted a bid, 1, however, withdrew. Of the remaining 3 companies, the review committee comprising staff and the project architects selected AccuBuild as the lowest responsive bidder, given the company's experience on similar projects in terms of scope of work and cost. The company has worked on a number of federal buildings and the references were very good. The project has diverse funding, state bond funds and a loan, proceeds from the sale of property, unrestricted CIP and ARPA funds. And with that, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Are there council questions on this motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please do.
Director Lewis, could you please remind the council about the previous contract, the bid amount for it, and the difference in cost to the town
Sure.
of the original contract and the new contract that was just awarded?
The original contract was accepted at $517,000 and I think $680. The difference between that and this amount is $600,000 roughly. So the increase is substantial.
Okay, and the delays, the 18-month delay was due to was this due to getting permits approved?
Yes, despite the fact that we went the third-party route, which is supposed to expedite the building permitting process. It actually
Okay.
spent most of that time in the site road division of DPI.
So essentially, because of DPI's non-response on reviewing and responding to these permit requests, we are now experiencing a $600,000 increase in this project.
I wouldn't call it a non-response. I think it was a complicated process on their end. And so it actually took them 18 months to get through it. You know, we had some floodplain issues that or requirements that weren't clear at the onset that the architects had to comply with, which included generating some different design documents. And I don't want to be unfair to DPI staff, but that part of the process took a long time.
Okay, so essentially, the architects weren't able to receive clear instructions from DPI regarding stormwater management?
I would say yes to that. It's a very complicated and sometimes convoluted process, and not everybody is on the same page in terms of what's required. And even if you review documents relating to the review process, it's not inclusive of all that has to be taken into account. That information has to come from the staff, and it wasn't forthcoming earlier in the process when I think it should have been.
Okay, well, by staff, are you referring to the staff at DPI, or are you referring
Yes.
to, okay,
Yes, the staff at DPI.
okay. And so you're essentially saying that the obscurity on what's required and what's needed and the non-consensus is an issue that rests over at DPI.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Councilmember Siddiq, you had your hand up next. Please go ahead.
Could you just clarify what the unrestricted ARPA funds means?
As unrestricted CIP funds.
Yeah,
That means there are no limits to the use of the money. Bond funds, for example, are restricted to their intended purposes. But capital improvement, some of the capital improvement funding is not. Does that answer your question, sir?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the information, Ms. Lewis. Just one question. Did our town staff do everything within our power to get this project complete under the original timeline?
We certainly tried.
That's what I expected. I know we are always on it. So I know it's, I'm trying not to force you to be undiplomatic in saying that the county doubled the cost of our project at around $500,000 or more. But that certainly sounds like what happened here, due to their negligence or incompetence or any number of factors that we frequently encounter with the county. And I hope that we, Mr. Mayor, as a council, can be in touch with our representation at the county, to express our displeasure on this.
I will mention that County Executive Alsobrooke actually put out a survey to solicit input and concerns about the DPI process. And I was able to share with them some of what I'm sharing with you this afternoon in writing, so that at least our experience can be taken into account. So they realize, I think, some deficiencies in that department. Permit review, I think, in a lot of communities is complicated and sometimes convoluted. This county has been trying to improve its process for a long time, and it looks like they're continuing to do that. I don't want to be unjustly harsh, and so I was actually pretty excited about an opportunity to convey my concerns and our experiences through this survey. The question is, what is going to happen as a result of it?
Agreed. And I just say, the permitting issue with the county is the one that just applies, as you know, to our town properties. I frequently hear from constituents issues with getting permits and stuff from the county. I know that's what held up Manifest Bread for several months, and being able to open. So yeah, that's a little disheartening that it's going to essentially double the cost of our project. And yeah, I hope we can be in touch with the county. And I do hear you on the improvements. I know I've heard from Councilmember Olson that they're trying to work on it and have made some progress. But 18 months is a long time.
It is.
And $500,000 is a lot of money. Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, may I just add a comment or two? Throughout this process, we actually had engaged with then Councilmember Guerrero at various points along the way, because we would get either no response or conflicting responses from DPI, and she did help us, and her staff helped us shake some things loose. As someone who has run a permit operation in another jurisdiction, I've never experienced anything quite like this. It is convoluted, confusing, and I have a better sense of why Prince George's County struggles a little bit in terms of economic development, and I think this needs fixed. Because it affects private investment in our town and throughout the county. And clearly, what has happened with supply chain and everything else impacted this. So it's really magnified because of what we went through with COVID and the effects of cost. But just the expense of time, because the town spent, I believe it was about $30,000 to go through an expedited process. So we went through the express lane, and the express lane took 18 months on a simple renovation project. But we are pleased to say tonight, as we're bringing this forward, we have the permits.
Right.
So the permits are in hand. If we can lock in on this price, we'll be able to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I'm going to allow myself to speak a little bit here and say that I attended the Prince George's County Municipal Association meeting last Thursday, and there were representatives newly appointed from DPI at that meeting, and they seemed very focused on improving customer experience and operations. So I think that there is some improvement, but as the council member said, it's unfortunate that the delay and the combination of the delay and the many issues going on raised our price by as much as it did. It's not a trivial amount of money at all. Are there any other council comments, any additional council comments on this motion? Are there any public comments on this motion? Been asked to raise my mic volume, I believe. Is this better? You guys hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. I can just speak up, do the version of it. So are there any additional council comments, or are there public comments on this motion? Seeing no unmuted microphones, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Sadiq,
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia.
Aye.
Has Councilmember Mayers arrived? Apparently not. I abstain. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. It's very exciting to be at this point after so many years of working on it. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 3, motion to repeal and replace resolution 2023-R-08 regarding the Board of Election Appeals. May I have a motion to repeal and replace resolution 2023-R-08?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Smith to repeal and replace resolution 2023-R-08 regarding the Board of Election Appeals. Is there a staff discussion of this resolution?
Director Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. When we previously adopted resolution 2023-R-08, there were several vacancies. And since that time, we have 2 additional volunteers that need to be added. So we would like to just repeal and replace with the new resolution that has the 2 new names on included.
Can you please scroll down to show the new members or the total members? So I will remark that we still have 1 empty slot. However, we have very often had empty slots going into the election. And fortunately, the Board of Election Appeals is not very often called to adjudicate an appeal. So hopefully this will be a symbolic board only. So are there additional council comments on this motion to repeal and replace? Councilmember Foe.
I want to say thank you to every single one of these citizens and anybody on the phone call this evening. We oftentimes see similar faces, and that's comforting to see that kind of civic participation. I'm lucky enough to have a small group of friends that I can consistently charge and ask, will you help us out? And I've got a husband and wife duo tonight, Drew and Caitlin, who are our neighbors, that are always ready, willing, and able to volunteer. And I'm just appreciative of everybody here and everybody on that list. So thank you.
Well said, council member. Any additional council comments? Any public comments on this motion? Hearing none, seeing no unmuted microphones, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Sadiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia. Councilmember Mejia.
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Has Councilmember Mayers joined us? Not that I see. and I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. Let's move on to agenda item, legislative action item number 4. A motion regarding participation in the Maryland Department of Agriculture Mosquito Control Program. I think we should have a staff presentation before we have a motion this evening.
Director Barnes, can you update the council, please?
Certainly. Good evening again, Mayor Thompson, members of the council, members of the community. Tonight, we're just seeking direction from the mayor and council regarding the town's participation in the Maryland Department of Agriculture Mosquito Control Program. There's been a significant amount of discussion about the mosquito control program over the last, I would say last year at least. We had Mr. Prendergast came in on February the 22nd and discussed the mosquito control program. One of the notable items that he talked about was the availability of an exemption that residents can apply for an exemption from the mosquito spraying program. And that provided a buffer of up to 300 feet on all sides of the property. And so that was something that we knew about last year, and we shared the information with the community, and we'll continue to do that this year if the mayor and council choose to move forward with the program. There isn't a lot of new information. There were no changes that I'm aware of in the way that the program operates from year to year. There's a slight increase in the cost, but we do need to confirm our participation by, I believe it is May the 5th. So that date is quickly approaching.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. So I'm trying to get the document up in front of me. Hold on for just a moment. So we need a motion to participate or to not participate in the program. And I don't know where the council is this evening, so I will entertain a motion from someone to either participate or to not participate in the program.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, council member.
I would like to make a motion that the town of Riverdale Park participate in the Maryland Department of Agriculture Mosquito Control Program.
Seconded.
Motion from Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Foe to participate in the mosquito control program. Is there discussion of this motion? As the maker, Councilmember Smith, you have the right to the first discussion.
Mosquitoes are bad. We should kill them. This stuff does that. We've been assured, and I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary, that this particular spray that they use has any adverse impact on other wildlife, plants, etc. I guess plants are wildlife. So yeah, I think this is good. Spraying good, mosquitoes bad. That's it.
Okay, Councilmember Foe, your hand is up.
Yeah, I too hate mosquitoes, and I would like to yield the rest of my time.
Okay, very good. Are there additional council comments? Are there public comments on this motion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote on the motion to participate in the Maryland Department of Agriculture Mosquito Control Program. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Present.
Councilmember Sadiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia. Councilmember Mejia, you're muted.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mayers does not appear to have arrived. I abstain. The motion passes 4-0. Is that the correct count? 4 ayes, 1 present, and 1 my abstention. Okay, let's move on to new business. There is an item of new business for those of you who checked the distribution This is based on some conversations I had. A lot of conversations. I guess I will introduce this since I asked that it be generated by the town staff. I had conversations with some council members and some candidates for council last week about signs in the town's right of way, campaign signs being placed in the town's right of way. And there appeared to be and did a careful review of the county ordinance, zoning ordinance that governs these. And after a careful review, discussion with staff, secondhand discussion with the town attorney, we have the ability to allow signage on town right of ways. It is currently absent any action. It is not allowed. The default from the ordinance, zoning ordinance, is that we are not allowed to have signs. And based on some feedback I had in talking with council members, then I think that we should consider this very carefully before doing anything permanent. But we can make a motion or take an action this evening, this resolution, in order to allow the essentially the same placement of signs that has occurred during town elections as far back as I can remember, and which is to allow on election day a large number of signs to be placed on the right of way in the block outside of town hall. And I believe that the placement of signs on private property, subject to some restrictions that are in the county zoning ordinance, is also allowed, as it has been done for many years. And so that is what this resolution is about. If we can scroll down a little bit so that the council can read this. I'm happy to discuss what I said, or what is in the resolution. I'm also happy to have a motion to approve it as provided. So whoever is controlling the screen, you could scroll down a little bit. Give the council another 30 or 40 seconds to read it. How about 40 seconds from now? Councilmember Smith, you have a question.
Yeah, I'd just like to explore, we're only doing, this is only for election day outside of town hall.
Yes.
Is there, other than just deliberation, is there a reason why we aren't authorizing townwide?
So the issue, there's some Supreme Court rulings from the mid 2010s, 2015 or so, that does not permit content-based discrimination. And so if the town has a tradition of if we find a sign in the town's right of way, then town staff will take it out and remove it regardless of the reason that it was placed there. And so if we wanted to open up all of the town's right of ways, then that is within our power. But it would cease that particular activity until such time as the permitted extension existed. And so I chose this as a starting point, but certainly the council can amend the location if desired, and the time for that matter.
Sure. I mean, my position, as I've discussed with some folks, including an attorney, aka my brother, um, is I think this is the restriction as it exists currently is unconstitutional. We already allow some signs, as I understand it, in the way of real estate signs in the right of way, but not others. Specifically in this case, political speech, which the Supreme Court has repeatedly found has a higher or broader degree of protection than commercial speech. I think that, if we're getting to a place where that's an issue of the types of signs we're allowing versus not, I think we could put together some parameters that signs must follow if they're going to exist, such as the we buy your house cash now signs typically are not very professionally done. So there could be some aesthetic standards, but I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand it from what's been explained to me, the restrictions as they exist now would not pass constitutional muster. Now I know it's very unlikely that we will have a civil rights lawsuits go to the Supreme Court here in Riverdale Park over the placement of signs. But in principle, I don't think we're in the right place. And I appreciate you, Mr. Mayor, taking the step and ensuring that we have the ability to exercise our rights to free speech as ourselves and our residents express their rights in a democracy and vote on May 1st. But if there is appetite on the council for going further than this, I'm certainly interested in that.
Okay, just to clarify a comment before I allow Councilmember Foe to speak one of your comments. The town does not allow the real estate directional signs.
right,
The
yes.
county allows the real estate signs.
Gotcha.
And having reviewed, briefly reviewed the recent Supreme Court decisions, which I would characterize as saying that political speech for that exact purpose is not more protected than commercial speech, according to the 2015. But there's a lot of case history, and so it may be that there are other cases that are not as clear cut as the 2015 was. But the 2015 one says that any restrictions must be content neutral. So the real estate signs, the your house, we buy your house for cash signs, all of those would have similar level of protection as political speech. That was my understanding of the 2015 Supreme Court decision. But that doesn't matter. The town has traditionally not allowed any signs in our right of way. We aren't always super efficient about clearing them out, but definitely when they are called out, then they are removed. Councilmember Foe?
Just thinking out loud here. We talk a lot about elections here. We have for a long time. We talk a lot about setting them up, establishing them, how we're going to administer them, the rules attaching them, and we still have no contested elections this year. It's frustrating in a sense. I'm glad I'm not running against anybody, but I don't think that benefits notoriety of election, increases voter turnout, all of those things that we talk about. I look at this and I think solely, and again, I'm not speaking to the constitutionality of it. It's above my pay grade, even though I do teach social studies. I believe it would be nice to be able to create spaces where we could encourage the creation and utilization of signs. I also want to approach that with caution as a resident of Prince George's County, who is still seeing election signs up all over the county for elections that we had 6 months ago. So I feel like I am in support of easing restrictions on signs. I mean, seriously, my first election, I bought 25 or 50 signs. I still utilize those same signs. I would give them to some friends in an uncontested election. I don't utilize them all. And I wish that I could have a place to put some of my signs where other candidates could put their signs as well, just drawing attention and notoriety to election. That's my thought process now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lingua in chat, but apparently, I think it was just to me, suggested a few minor rewordings that I have no objections to. So adding an only before on May 1st, 2023. And no, I'm sorry. I thought I had turned up the gain a little bit. Perhaps I need to just pull the microphone closer. So Councilmember Lingua in text.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
We have a motion on the floor.
We do not.
Okay. So would it be better that we bring up amendments once we have a motion on the floor?
You can amend before, you can amend after. It's your choice. Would you like to make a motion?
I think there needs to be a motion on the floor.
Well, I think that by the rules of order, if someone wants to make an amendment to this resolution, wants to reword this resolution before introducing that, that's allowed. So they cannot amend it, but they can reword it. So does anyone want to introduce the resolution as is? Does someone want to reword the resolution slightly? Or do we want to move on from this item of business?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion. I'm just making sure I have the wording that I want to say accurate. It occurs to me that we could just allow signs generally while we are in election cycle up into the end of the day, May 1st, and then figure the rest of this out after that. And so I'd like, I'm sorry. Sorry, I thought somebody.
You have the floor, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking at this and trying to figure out the language. Yeah, so essentially I want to make this same motion, but striking the solely on the right of way along 5,000 block of Queensberry Ave. So permitting signs in the town of Riverdale Park from now until let's say May 2nd, 2023, so that we're sure that the we count the whole day of the 1st, with any signs placed no larger than 30 inches by 24 inches and located at least 25 feet from the closest corner of any intersection.
Okay, so I'm going to say what I think you want for that that whereas the mayor and council desire to permit signs in town rights of way as follows: from immediately after adoption of this resolution until noon on May 2nd, 2023 on all town rights of ways, with any signs placed no larger than 30 inches by 24 inches and located at least 25 feet from the closest corner of any intersection. Is that your intent, Councilmember Smith?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Siddiq, substantially similar to the resolution as provided, except substituting that the town is permitting signs of the size as presented originally, but on any rights of way through starting from immediately after adoption until noon on May 2nd, 2023. Is there discussion of this motion? Councilmember Lingua, I see your mic is live. Do you want to make a statement?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Being that this is already articulated under the subtitle 27 in zoning part 12, under signs section is stated 27,593. And what it talks about is prohibited signs, and being that it has also been a longstanding in the town code regarding placement of signs during elections and also addressing electioneering as well, but that's separate. About placement of signs. My thought is that if this wants to be, if the council wants to look at this and revisit this and decide and debate how it is it wants to be done, no objection to that. What I have an objection to is this to being done, trying to carve out an exception at such at really, the 11th hour of an election season, because it's come to the attention of some that you can't have your sign in a public right of way, even though it's clearly stated. Having an allowance for on election day to be able to be put out in accordance with election laws in the proximity of the polling place for this go around, I have no problem with. But to be doing this in a way at the 11th hour is just not the proper way to do this, and it should be discussed and addressed at another time.
Thank you for your remarks, Councilmember Lingua. Are there additional council comments or questions on this motion, which is on the floor?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that, I am not an expert on county zoning or zoning at all, but I know, I've worked in politics for nearly 20 years. I've been on more campaigns than I can count and more places than I can count. I've never seen, enforced restrictions on political signage this restrictive, ever. And I have never seen it in the town of Riverdale Park, to be frank. We just had an election in the midterms last year. We had a 2020 election. We had a special election before that. And I've never noticed these restrictions being imposed either on our roads or on county roads. Anywhere in the county, you could go and see signs within 25 feet of intersections, more or less than 10 feet from the road, et cetera, et cetera. And I dare say that there was no threat to public safety or the integrity of the elections as a result. So if we're making a change to allow things outside of the town hall on election day, we're already making a change at the 11th hour, as the councilman put it. But as I see it, this motion would just codify for the election cycle that we are already in, has already started, that ends in, a week, that, we will follow the same practices as they have been enforced, at least as long as I have lived in this town and in this county.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just for clarity on staff operations. In these previous elections, for example, Beale Circle became a favorite place for large political signs. Staff went and removed those signs. They had essentially taken over the park area there, obscured the public art, and those signs were removed. And so the town does have, from an operations standpoint, of history of following through on the prohibition of having signs in the town's public right of way. The staff take no position on the action that the council is considering this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. And I will hazard a little bit and say that I agree with the statements that have been made this evening about the county's enforcement of their own crafted legislation in previous elections. That while it may be on the books that there are restrictions, I certainly haven't seen the county enforcing them on their rights of way. Any additional council comments? Councilmember Foe.
I just want to understand this. The current motion only pertains to the upcoming election, correct?
The current motion is under subtitle 27, zoning part 12, sign section 27-593. The town council, in this case, is allowed to authorize signage on our rights of way. And this would be authorizing signage of a certain size on our rights of way, content neutral, any signage, starting after it passes until noon on May 2nd, 2023.
And Councilman Lingua thinks that maybe excluding this, he thinks we need to take more substantive measures within code to change this, correct?
I think I think the Councilmember Lingua and I'll just add myself, think that we should take this under consideration carefully for the long term.
Okay, that's my kid. Okay, I'm fine. Thank you.
We should be taking it under consideration for the long term, yet this is not the time to do it. What was proposed originally with this legislation, as I'm reading it, is a concession between an outright prohibition on a public right of way to being allowed for a use of placing campaign signs on a designated right of way area for a designated amount of time. What's being proposed with the amended language is essentially allowing to have campaign signs placed on the right of way, which would infer anywhere on the right of way, which means one could place a campaign sign in front of someone's property who may not have taken a position on the election or feel that they would not want to vote for that person. It is a public right of way. If people want to essentially place campaign signs on their property, as is designated by town, which a person on a campaign can determine by contacting the constituent, the voter in whatever in the respective ward or townwide, be it a mayor's race, and ask them, would you like a yard sign? Most anyone I've talked to from county elections or state elections has always come and asked me, can I place a yard sign in your yard? To which I would respond to them either yes or no. But it's essentially, it's my choice.
Yeah.
It's the resident's choice what sign is outside in front of their property.
Council member, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that the way that I'm looking at this scenario right now is a temporary measure in an uncontested election in its entirety to drum up public support. Simultaneously, I also see it as being very problematic for the scenarios that you just posted or talked about right now. So I feel like this is a place where I can land on for right now, but not long term.
Well, I'd like to land on something, Councilman, but I don't think this is the time to land on something as broad as what's being considered.
So I will remind all council members that we need to be careful to not have conversations with each other. We will be getting to public comment shortly.
I apologize. That was my fault.
That's fine. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, First, just a question for staff. Have there been any complaints about yard signs in front of people's houses that they did not request?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Thank you. So this isn't a broad change. It is a change that will last 1 week and will conduct the election, not even the election, will allow signs to be placed as they have the same way for every election and as they currently are replaced right now. As they currently are placed right now. And as I understand from my conversations, as most, and if not most, certainly more than just me on the council, understood the rules to be already. When you talk about what the restrictions are now, as I understand it, 10 feet from the road, is it 50 feet from an intersection? And not in the public right of way. In a town as densely populated as ours, there are very few places at all within the town that you could legally place a sign. And I don't think that's where we want to be. What I've proposed is allowing the status quo as it has been enforced around town elections, as long as I've lived here, to remain in place for another, 6.5 days or whatever, until we can take this up in a longer term way. And I agree with the opinions that have been expressed by my colleagues on the council, that we should take time to deliberate this for a long-term solution. And I'd be happy to be part of those conversations. But right now, I think it's important to preserve, like I said, what the status quo has been, what has been understood to be the restrictions for at least as long as I can remember, and to just allow that to stand for the next 6.5 days.
So I'm just going to weigh in and say that the one distinction about this, and I don't know that the commercial entities will wake up to this in 6.5 days, is that if it's passed as currently on the floor, then a commercial entity can legally place a sign in front of my house. So the your house, cash for your house now signs can legally be placed in front of my house. And while I'm also not a lawyer, I believe that if I decided as a homeowner to remove that sign, that the commercial entity would be able to ask me for damages based on the fact that they had legally placed a sign and that I had removed their sign and was depriving them of business income as a result of that. So it's not just allowing placement of signs similar to what's happened in the past. It's opening us up a little bit more.
For 6.5 days, right?
Yes. Are there any additional council comments? I believe that many people have spoken twice already, but I'll just ask just in case.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
I believe I'll treat your few word comment as not being a real speech and give you one more. Councilmember.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Number one, in the time that I've been running for office, it has been, as far as I understand, as the standard, that if a sign was to be placed, it could be placed on someone's property, which there are numerous opportunities to be able to have a sign placed to be on display for others to see. Number two, and this is a clarification, I've heard you use the term status quo twice, and I'm wondering, is that being confused with essentially what one is seeing as de jure versus de facto? De jure has it that signs are not to be placed that way. De facto is that on occasions by some entities outside of the town, they are. I would see that as a violation. I would not see it as being status quo.
Okay. I will say that, this is the new zoning ordinance, and I did not go dredging into the history to see whether it was different than the old zoning ordinance or not. I don't know the answer to that question. New zoning ordinance came into effect last April. Okay, are there any public comments on this motion? I believe, Mr. Enyaq.
Good evening. My comment would just be, I think I understand the concern of, someone putting a sign, I'm assuming on the sidewalk in front of a person's house, maybe not on their property, but sort of in that box from the sidewalk to the road, and sort of that being a tacit endorsement of a candidate a person may not choose, and the fear behind that. I would urge the council to consider the one, how often has that ever happened before? But I think two, the downside of such a restrictive sign policy, I think it's been mentioned earlier, but the amount of people that I've run into knocking doors personally who had no idea that the election happened until they saw a sign either in front of my house or someone else's, and the power of signage and limiting it only to people in front of people's houses, I think misses an opportunity to sort of gather support and increase recognition. And I think the reality is, in a town with the amount of uncontested elections, most doors do not get knocked in this town, right? And so people will find out from sort of seeing signs in public areas, and so that may consider. Identifying if in a long-term solution, identifying areas that may warrant sort of this type of signage, if that makes sense. I would be in favor of that. And then just lastly, the only thing is in terms of the timing, rather than putting particular dates, I would suggest maybe considering, X amount of days before and after an election, if you were thinking of a long-term solution, so you wouldn't have to update this every single year. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enyaq. Are there additional public comments? And Mr. Enyaq, I assume your hand is stuck in the air and not that you have an additional comment?
It's coming down slowly.
Okay. There are no additional council comments, no additional public comments, then I will take this to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Was there
Attention deficit. My bad.
Councilmember
Councilmember Foe wanted a better last name. I think that's what it was.
Okay. Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Nay.
Councilmember Sadiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mayers is not in attendance. If I counted correctly, that passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. I abstain. I'll add that. So we have effective immediately signage in public right-of-ways until noon next Tuesday. Okay. There is one other item of new business. It was brought to my attention just before the meeting that Councilmember Mejia needs to have recent absences excused. So I'm not sure at what point.
Director Barnes will be able to provide that information, sir.
Director Barnes, can you provide us with what meetings need to have an absence excused at this time?
It can be either April 3rd, April 15th, or April the 22nd. Those are the last 3 absences. So any one of those being excused would be sufficient.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Mejia on one or another of those days?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to have the council member from Ward 5, Councilmember Mejia's absence on April 22nd, excused.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Siddiq. Is there any discussion? Are there any public comments?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear that the meeting on April 22nd was the second of 2 budget hearings. April 15th was the first of 2 budget hearings, of which of the second budget hearing, those only in attendance was the mayor and myself from the town council. The budget is the most important thing we pass in the time that we are on the council. The hearings prior to that, to review the budget in detail, are 2 of the most important meetings leading up to that vote. And I have serious issue with excusing absences from either of those meetings when there was not notice really ahead of time, when dates were determined for these meetings, that there would be a substantial conflict of interest and that someone was not going to be able to make it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Does that conclude your remarks? Councilmember, does that conclude your remarks?
That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I don't believe we have minutes for the 22nd meeting. I'll add that Councilmember Foe was briefly present at the beginning of the meeting. Councilmember Siddiq was there for a substantial portion of the meeting. But as you
My
said,
apologies on that inaccuracy.
at the end of the meeting, it was just yourself and me. Okay, nevertheless, we have a motion on the floor to forgive the absence of Councilmember Mejia from the April 22nd budget hearing. Is there additional council discussion? Are there public comments? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Abstain.
Councilmember Siddiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mayers is not present. I abstain. The motion passes 4-0. Are there any items of new business? Seeing no indications, are there any items of unfinished business? Seeing no indications, are there any, may I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Smith to adjourn. This motion is neither discussed nor debated. I'll move immediately to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Councilmember Siddiq.
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mayers is still not present. I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. We are adjourned at 8:39 p.m. I'd like to move immediately into the work session as the evening has gotten late. So call the work session to order on at 8:39 p.m. also. This is a much more informal meeting. We don't have to have votes on all sorts of things, but are there any changes that are required to the agenda? Hearing none. Are there any conflicts of interest for items on the agenda? Hearing none, let's go ahead and jump into presentations. Presentation number 1 is review of edits to the fiscal year 2024 proposed operating and CIP budget.
Director or Deputy Director Jones will lead through this list of edits that were made.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Lustician. So there were a number of changes that were made to the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. The first was on page 48. We had a total of $1,021,258 to be transferred to CIP from the general fund. And that total was changed. An additional $85,000 was needed to be transferred to the CIP from general funds. So the total was changed to $1,106,258. The reason being was a change that was made to CIP project 20DS06, which was building demolition and parking lot improvements. The unrestricted CIP total went from $180,000 to $265,000. Reason being, there was state bond bill revenue, which was also reduced from $335,000 to $100,000. Additionally, in that project, in order to make up the difference, so you had the $85,000, we also had a transfer from 24 PW06 for $150,000. So that made up the difference. When doing so, we had to transfer additional revenue from the general fund to CIP unrestricted. So you have changes there on page 48, as well as 222, those 3 changes. Another change which came from the first budget meeting was on page 56 and page 59. Operating expenditures were reduced by $1,000 in admin services. Total operating expenditure in admin services went from $252,000 to $252,730 to $251,730. And this was due to a change in the community events and public arts. We had a total of $4,200 at the request of Councilmember Lingua. We moved $1,000 from the special projects in admin services for $1,000. So the total there was $12,000, which was reduced to $11,000. And then the public arts total went from $4,200 to $5,200. So that accounts for that change. Another change that we had was could be found on page 201 and 202. We have restricted and unrestricted revenues. Grant revenue increased from $500,000 to $650,000. Additionally, the total of state Maryland bond bills totaled $935,000. As I mentioned before, in project CIP 20DS06, that was reduced, so we had a total of $700,000. And lastly, was the transfer from the general fund, which I covered as well. $1,021,258 increased by $85,000 to $1,106,258. And the last change that I'd like to go over as well is the additional sheet that we had, page 244. We've introduced a stormwater improvement. State grant total was 0, and we received additional state grant revenue of $150,000, and that can be found in CIP 24 PW04 stormwater improvement.
And Mr. Jones, if I could just comment on that one. When we went over the budget on Saturday, we had, I'll use the word parked. We had parked that unanticipated grant from the state in a separate project, and that was my error. And so that's money intended for a new project. And so we've created a project sheet for stormwater management for a project to be decided by the mayor and council. Good, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Lustician. So the last change that we had was in the American Rescue Plan Act, page 252. We actually had a line that was not totaling correctly. The numbers were correct, however, the total was off. So we changed the total required project funding from 380,000 to 370,000. Once we got that total to actually calculate correctly. So those are the major changes that we did make. There were some formatting changes as well that we made, missing commas, misalignment and things of that nature. But the changes that I just covered are the major changes that we made. And if there are any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there council questions or comments on this review of edits? I'll
Mayor,
just
if I
say
may.
that, Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
Please go ahead. Go ahead first.
Just going to say that given the size and complexity of this budget, I'm surprised that there weren't more commas and formatting errors and in fact numerical errors. So thank you to the staff for the hard work you put into preparing this and making sure that it is as accurate as possible. Councilmember Lingua?
Mr. Director Jones, you could, Deputy Director Jones, if you could go back to the portion you were talking about regarding the adjustment for of the $1,000. That's going directly from monies to public events part. Now, does that include money that would also be dispersed, augmenting the amount that goes to the music at the Mansion program?
Is that are you referring to the Jazz on the Lawn?
Jazz on the Lawn, yeah.
Yes.
Music Mansion, okay. So essentially the aggregate amount is $1,000 being transferred over there, which is divvied up between augmented funding for what Riverdale Park Arts does with the Music on the Patio series at Town Center Market, as well as the Jazz on the Lawn at Riversdale. Is that correct?
Yes. That total, that total 1,000. It fits underneath public arts, but the specific project, as you mentioned, is the Jazz on the Lawn. The total there was 1,200, and now it is 2,200, giving the total public arts 4,200 to 5,200.
That's right, because we had talked about Mr. DeLutis had said that he had already calculated in the higher rates he would be needing to pay. Correct?
Director Barnes?
Yes, we've already received the invoices from Mr. DeLutis for that program. So
Okay.
he had already calculated that in.
Okay, I just wanted to get clear on that. All right, thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any additional council questions for Deputy Director Jones? Are there any public comments? Okay, thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate that. Let's move on to the next presentation, base salary competitive market analysis conducted by Bolton USA.
Director Smith is with us tonight. He'll have some introductory comments and an opportunity for the council to ask questions. Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon or good evening, Mayor and Council. as you know, Bolton USA completed the base pay competitive market review on March the 2nd, and they made a presentation to the council shortly thereafter. And they made several recommendations. The town, the one recommendation was that the town adjust the entire structure of our pay range schedule by 7%. The FY 2024 budget was built on this recommendation. With the only adjustment is that staff would receive 3.5% increase on July 1 and another 3.5% increase on January 1 of 2024. With this approach that we took in the budget, the town will save around $185,000. And so we've accepted their recommendation, one of their recommendations, on the pretense that we do it in 2 stages, 3.5 in July and 3.5 in January. And that's what we built the budget on. So if you have any questions, do let me know. And I think Town Manager Lestitian had said he would put it on the schedule for tonight to have a conversation. I think Councilmember Lingua asked that we bring it forward.
Thank you, Director Smith. Council members, any discussion of this item? Councilmember Siddiq.
I would again like to commend the staff on their excellent performance. The budget that you prepared was just fantastic, answered a lot of questions before they could even be asked. Our staff team got a budget award that they're, a top preparer in the state. And yet we are endeavoring to merely increase their salaries to the median of our region. And I'm just wondering if we should really think about increasing their salaries to above the median to reflect their performance and to consider the impacts on this town were we to lose some key players in the staff, that perhaps a few dollars spent now would alleviate concerns later.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Siddiq. Are there additional council comments on the presentation on the base salary competitive market analysis? Councilmember Smith.
I would concur with all of Councilmember Sadek's comments. Literally every single one of them. This is a great budget. The staff did fantastic work putting it together. We need to make sure we retain our staff and not just the budget being put together, but the time they spend in the hearings with us as council members. I know I spent a few hours on the phone with John and staff who were happy to answer every question I had, no matter how silly some of them probably were, and walk through the whole budget with me. So I definitely appreciate that and agree with any sentiment regarding recognizing our staff, paying them as the professionals they are, and ensuring that we're able to retain them.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Foe.
I agree. Employee retention is the number one thing that we can do as a council to ensure the function of this town, and this staff has been just remarkable to work with. My job isn't difficult. I attempt to get to every meeting that I possibly can, but this information is distributed by thoughtful, intelligent, engaged people that want and take pride in the success of their job and how these people respond to them and how we look. I'm just eternally grateful to have the opportunity to work with such tremendous people. And I think as a town, our best investment is in our staff. I yield.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Foe. Are there additional council comments? Seeing Mr. Lestitian, go ahead.
This discussion is in the context of a proposed budget. we've presented a balanced budget of 9.4 and some change. If the council desires to increase from the recommended 7%, or there was another recommendation where just the higher earners would get 10% and the lower earners would get nothing. That's part of the recommendation, or an option that Bolton made. And I don't think that's necessarily a good option. I do think that employee retention is extremely important. And one finding that Bolton had was that Mr. Smith has used the current approved pay range plan appropriately, that it's working. And this is about being market competitive. And we selected, Mr. Smith and I, selected 15 jurisdictions to be compared to. If other jurisdictions were included or excluded, or some of these excluded, we would have different results, most likely, from Bolton. We went with a large number, trying to have a good cross-section of where we may lose staff to, where staff may be, or future staff may be applying to other jurisdictions, including us. And the 7% gets us to, or gets most positions it gets all positions in the range, because Bolton said between 90 and 110% at the 50% time. And that's what we're trying to achieve. If the council desires to increase the pay range plan and offer higher raises, we need $185,000. Now, $185,000, that could be taken from savings, and then next year we'd have to figure that out. Well, and that 185, that's just if we gave 7% as of July 1 instead of delaying it. So if we wanted to give higher percents, Mr. Jones would have to run some numbers, but it would be north of 185,000 additional dollars that we would need. And so we would either have to cut the expenditures in the budget by at least 185,000, if not more. I think it would be more. So we would have to cut expenditures or increase revenue. 185,000 is 2 cents on the tax roll. So that would be increasing the real property tax to fund this, or cutting expenditures, whichever the council so directs.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Councilmember Siddiq.
Yeah, I just want to try to highlight again, clarify some of the town manager's comments, in that the study that resulted in the 7% recommendation is merely to get our pay scale up to the median of the 15 communities in our area. Is that correct?
It's to get the anchor step. Step 7 is the anchor step. It's an 18-step scale. And step 7 as the anchor step is the market step. And that's all Bolton measured was the anchor step, the market step.
And so, I would contend we've got a team of all-stars here. Certainly, the budget's been prepared. They've done an outstanding job of preparing that budget. But going forward, I think the council needs to be really mindful that you've got a team of all-stars here. You need to consider the impact that's going to happen when you start losing all-stars. That concludes my remarks.
Any additional council comments? Any town manager position.
Sir, I'm not sure what the council's direction is on this item.
Well, I think that this was just a presentation, and if I'm looking at the agenda ahead, work session discussion item 2 is amendment of fiscal year 2023 budget. So maybe if we're getting this is discussion that we should consider paying staff more. And so when we get to discussion item 2, then we can discuss how much, if that is the will of the council, and how to pay for it.
And Mr. Mayor, discussion item 2 is amendment of the current year budget to account for revenue and expenditures primarily related to the automated enforcement program.
Okay,
So,
this could come up under new business then,
okay,
or the council could amend the agenda if they wish to. Those are both options. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I think if I heard Councilmember Sadek correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I think I'm in the same place, is that you know, we acknowledge all the work that the staff has done on the budget, and recognize that changing anything at this point in the game would require a lot more work to the already Herculean task the staff has already gone through to put this together. So personally, I'm for leaving what we have in place, but looking for fiscal years to accelerate the pay scale a little bit. I mean, 7% off the bat is not nothing. And I think even if we were going to get higher raises to the staff, we wouldn't do all of that over one night. It would be gradual as they work their way through the steps of the schedule. That's where I'm at on it. Sorry if Councilmember Sadek, if I mischaracterize your position, but I recognize the work that would go into making changes at this late hour, and we just hope that we can look to accelerate the schedule in future years.
Councilmember Sadiq gave a thumbs up, which I believe indicates that he also is not calling to amend this year's budget. So I will take that as it was. Mr. Town Manager.
You know, after 3 years, I still miss hitting the mute button sometimes. But I do want to express my sincere appreciation on behalf of the whole staff team for the council being supportive of employee retention and being supportive of adjusting salaries upward. We sincerely appreciate that. Not every jurisdiction has a council that is that supportive of the staff team, and we sincerely appreciate that, as well as the kind comments made this evening.
I agree. Thank you. Okay, is there additional discussion about the presentation on base salary competitive market analysis? Okay, did I call for public comments? And are there any public comments? Just make sure. Or move on. Okay, let's move on. Next item on the agenda is my report. I'm going to be very short, very sweet. There's an election next Monday, and I hope to see a lot of people turning out to vote. And I hope that we have a vigorous discussion with constituents at the polls and can discuss all sorts of interesting things there. Second item is that there's a new COVID variant floating around. It's mostly, well, until recently, it was mostly overseas. It's about 10% of US cases at this time. It was at about 3 or 4%. Well, actually, the 10% was about a week ago. The 3 or 4% was the week before. So we will see how it goes. Everyone try to stay safe best as you can. That concludes Mayor's report for this evening. Mr. Town Manager, your report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I too will endeavor to be brief. Want to thank the staff team as well as the community and the mayor and council who provided a review of the budget document. It is our most important and public document, and we appreciate the input that we've received. There was the Anacostia Watershed Society Earth Day cleanup that happened while the budget hearing was going on. Pleased to report there were 40 volunteers, 32 bags of trash were collected, 30 bags of recycling were collected, 200 pounds of bulk trash, and 10 tires in that cleanup. As I think everyone present in the call know, but for those watching, Election Day schedule is Monday, May the 1st at Town Hall, 5008 Queensberry Road. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. There's a legislative meeting that will be held virtually via Zoom following the closing of the polls and after the Board of Election has completed their duties. There's also a meeting on May 2nd, a legislative meeting on May 2nd, and I've been advised to expect a full agenda, and we have 2 public hearings that night. One on the closure of 54th Avenue Park, or 54th, and it's not Avenue, it's 54th Place for the Pocket Park. And then the other public hearing is on the town's tax rate. So both of those are on May 2nd at 7:30 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. That brings us to Council Committee and Ward reports. Councilmember Smith, Ward 1. Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Smith has either stepped away or is having technical.
I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you. I stepped away to run downstairs because I forgot that I had left down there this wonderful letter from Raz Development, who will be developing or who are interested in developing the Chambers Funeral Home site. I'm realizing now some things about my cardiovascular fitness after running up the stairs with this letter. So the meeting will be 7 p.m. May 25th at 7630 45th Street, 2nd floor, behind District Taco in the RPS retail area. I encourage folks to attend, particularly Ward 1 residents. This will be your chance to ask the developers questions about the project. I'll say for myself, Raz Development has been, they've been very pleasant to work with. They're a developer, so we'll still need to have conversations with them as a town and hold them accountable to their promises, but I'm looking forward to this meeting and hope other folks can attend as well. Election, May 1st, get out and vote. If you're looking for me that day, I'll be outside the town hall. What is it, 200 feet from the polls, Mr. Mayor? Yeah, I will be, other than when I'm voting, no closer than 200 feet. And I look forward to seeing folks there. Also, we will roll into next week, Teacher Appreciation Week. So thank you to all the teachers out there, including the council member from Ward 2. And would also note that the National Teacher of the Year was welcomed at the White House today. And she is a member of America's largest labor union, the National Education Association. So congratulations to her. And then just thanks again to the staff for all the time you spent on the budget, in particular for me personally, the time we spent on a call, walking through it and answering my questions. I really appreciate that. And that is all I have right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Foe, Ward 2.
Unfortunately, it wasn't me again. National Teacher of the Year. I just can't get it, you know? I will be out at the polls next Monday. Looking forward to talk to everyone who comes in and votes. I am incredibly happy to offer my support to our incumbent mayor. I think you've done a remarkable job, and I love supporting you. It's just been a tremendous pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you and everyone in this staff. And I look forward to trying to do it for 2 more years. With that, I'll reserve the rest of my comments till next week's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Foe. Starting to stray towards a little bit of electioneering there, but.
I was worried. That's why I got off the mic.
Okay.
His opponent might have a problem with it.
Councilmember Lingua, Ward 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for pointing that out. CCAR CDC will be holding a public health fair May 6th near the location where the Sarvis Cafe is. I believe that's 5711 Sarvis Avenue, which is just off Kenilworth Avenue. In regards to the budget, based on some cycling that I've done around town, I'm having reservations on the amount that's committed to the budget for tree maintenance and removal. I believe the amount that we have in the budget, Deputy Director Jones, please correct me if this is inaccurate. I don't have a book open right with me at this moment. I believe we had budgeted $65,000. In light of the fact that we are still 18 months out from getting a completed survey on all the trees in the town public right-of-way, and the condition of some of the trees that I'm seeing in this town that are going to need some substantial work and or removal. There's a very good chance that we would burn through that rather quickly. I think this is something we can talk about later in the meeting. It may be that we would come under that $65,000, but based on what I'm seeing, I have a feeling we're going to come very close to it. And my thought is better safe than sorry than trying to go back later and trying to do a budget amendment later on in the fiscal year. With that, I'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. Councilmember Sadiq, Ward 4.
Good evening. As you know, I'm not running for re-election, so presumably this is my last town meeting as a sitting council member. It's been great working with you all. I think you're doing great work, and I really appreciate my time in the town, and I think you've got a great plan laid out. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Sadiq, but you don't get off quite that easily. The new council isn't sworn in until the first Monday in June, so you still have the May 1st, May 2nd, and a work session.
Presumably, then I'll be a lame duck. So,
but there's still, you still have some votes ahead of you, so not quite there. Okay, Councilmember Mejia, Ward 5.
Good evening. I have no report for today.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Let's move on to public comments. Are there any public comments this evening? Don't see any hands raised or microphones unmuted, so let's go ahead to work session discussion items. Item number 1, fiscal year 2023 revenue update. I'm going to step away from my screen just to fill up my glass of water, but I will be able to hear and be able to run back should my chairing duties be needed.
Deputy Director Jones.
Thank you. Good evening, again, members of the public, Mayor and Council. Tonight's revenue report is an analysis of the current fiscal year and the 3 fiscal years that preceded, with 5 major revenue categories, first being local taxes. As of April 21st, the total for local taxes is $6,709,338. In comparison to other years, for fiscal year 2022, up to that point, the total was $6,681,000. Fiscal year 2021, $6,529,000, and fiscal year 2020, $6,102,000. So, as I covered in a prior revenue analysis report, 4001 real estate taxes. Prince George's County was late in issuing tax bills, so we were delayed in receiving that revenue. But as of the 21st, we are now at 100% of the budgeted figure, which was $5,527,000. So that is promising. 4008 is lower than previous fiscal years, and again, we covered that as well. But that's due to the lower tangible threshold. Local taxes is at $567,000, which is more than we've received at this point in any time. So that continues to be promising. We're at 81%. Historically, we've received the majority of our revenues in the months of the end of April, end of May, and June. So we still expect to hit the budgeted figure of $695,000. Operating taxes is already at the budgeted figure, actually exceeding such, $237,640. The budgeted amount was $225,000. So overall, total taxes is at 92% of what was budgeted. And as we continue to monitor the revenue, we hope to continue to hit our target by the end of the fiscal year. The next major category we have is licenses and permits. For this particular category, we've actually exceeded the 100% mark there, with 2 months left in the fiscal year. So we have a total of 201,000, which exceeded the amount that we were in the previous fiscal year of 196,000. 2021, we were at 222,000, and in 2020, a total of 193,000. The next major category is administrative fees, which includes abatement charges and municipal fractions. This year, we did have an issue with one of the properties. So the municipal infractions have exceeded any year in the prior that you see on the screen. We have a total of 33,280. In the previous year, that total was just 5,300, 1,400 for 2021, and 2020, we had a total of 3,600. So again, our neighborhood services team is doing a great job ensuring that the town code is being upheld. But we definitely have an outlier here as far as revenue is concerned. The next major category is fines and forfeitures. We have a total of 36,530. This includes police reports, vehicle impounds, and parking citations. At this point, we are close to where we were in fiscal year 2021. We're a bit up from fiscal year 2022. And fiscal year 2020 appears to be an outlier year. That total was 53,000. And the next major category is community safety programs, which includes the Safe Speeds for Students or speed camera program. At this point, we have a total of 1,072,000. The previous year was a pretty large year, considering it exceeded both 2021 and 2020. A total of 1,157,000. 2021, we had a total of 752,000, and 2020, a total of 444,000. So the total net operating income at this point, at least for the categories that we have displayed on the screen, there are additional revenue sources, but we choose to cover the major ones as far as report in comparison. We have a total of 8,052,000 for fiscal year 2022. That figure was 8,073,000. Fiscal year 2021, 7,542,000. And fiscal year 2020, a total of 6,894,000. So overall, if we include all of our revenue, The town is actually at 101% of the budgeted amount. So we have reached our total budgeted amount for fiscal year 2023, with still 4 months of revenue to be received. So we do actually anticipate having a figure that falls in line with what we put in the budget for an estimated actual. Again, our speed camera revenue, we will be receiving 4 additional months of speed camera revenue, as the revenue that we receive is 2 months behind. So yes, that concludes the revenue analysis. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there council questions for the Deputy Director?
I have none.
Thank you, council member. Don't see any other raised hands or microphones open. Are there any public comments or questions from members of the public? Okay, thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Lots of good news in there. So I think we're all happy to just soak it up and not ask you too many questions. Don't want to ruin the good news by asking any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to discussion item 2, amendment of the fiscal year 2023 budget.
Mr. Jones, if you just want to continue.
Sure. So for the amendment that we have proposed, for the purpose of amending town fiscal year 2023 operating and capital improvement budget by recognizing and appropriating certain revenues in excess of those anticipated for purposes related to automated speed enforcement and generally relating to the amendment of the town's fiscal year 2023 budget. So in short, the budget amendment that we have is actually to increase revenue, speed camera revenue, by $400,000, as well as the contractual services side, which also includes the contracted speed camera expenditures. Reason being, at this point, we've actually exceeded what was budgeted. Currently, as of the 21st, our speed camera expenditures are at $415,656. The budgeted figure is $355,000. So with the budget amendment, we will be increasing the contractual services to $755,000. And then the revenue, we'd also be increasing that by $400,000 as well. The total budget amount that we have currently is $745,000, so that will be increased as well. Yeah, so that would increase the total budget figure by $400,000. And if there is any questions regarding that, I'd be happy to answer that as well.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there questions from the council? Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, just to confirm, we have already reached what was designated for spending on this program.
Yes, that is correct.
And how many more months do we have left on that or for the fiscal year?
So it would be, while we just have 2 months left in the fiscal year, the way that the speed camera revenue, it's we receive it actually 2 months in arrears. So the month of April, this month, we just received February. So we have 4 more months of speed camera revenue and expenditure.
Got you. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the council for Deputy Director Jones? Are there any questions from the public? Questions or comments from the public for Deputy Director Jones? on this discussion item? Okay, let's move on to the next discussion item.
Oh, my hand is raised, actually,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see
if
that.
I may.
Mr.
No problem.
Mr. Yang, go ahead.
Just my question is I was surprised to see, I guess, am I hearing it correctly that the expenditure for the speed cameras is not a fixed cost, that it sort of increases and it's at an uncertain rate, or is it as it's used, the costs increase?
Yes, correct. It is a variable cost. As the revenue increase, the expenditures increase as well. It's based off of lookups. So the more speeding cars that you have, the more ticket revenue, but you also have higher expenditures as well.
Is that expenditure to revenue proportionate every single time? So say like $10 for revenue, but it costs you $3 for the lookup. Is it a fixed amount like that, or is that also variable?
Yeah, the lookup amount is a fixed rate, but the variable would just be the number of cars.
And if I can add, it would also be the number of citations issued, because you could have lookups and not have a citation issued depending on a variety of factors.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, any additional public comments or questions for our council? Councilmember Smith.
I'm sorry, that just piqued my interest there, Mr. Town Manager. Did I hear correctly that we pay the vendor whether we're issuing a citation or whether a citation is issued or not?
I believe so. Is Deputy Chief Turner here?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Can you explain the difference between a lookup and a ticket issuance and when we pay a lookup fee?
I believe so. So if a citation is issued, and sometimes they may be voided for could be emergency vehicle for just cause, things like that, we still pay the lookup fee. Or if it's a vehicle that has a wrong registration plate or such. That sometimes, not if a citation is issued in error, but if, like say a rental vehicle or something like that, they don't get citations.
And do we have any evidence that the speed camera program has meaningfully decreased the incidence of speeding in Riverdale Park?
I believe it it decreases the accidents. I don't know that it decreases speeding. It does, obviously, in the areas where the cameras are. If you drive in those areas, you can see the flow of traffic slows.
Well, I mean, if we have 4 months left and we are already at our appropriated amount, what we expected, it would sound like to me that it isn't.
Well,
that it isn't reducing speeding in the areas where the cameras are.
Well, we also increased the we have additional cameras than what we had previous year.
well, and Mr. Mayor, if I may, as it relates to the budget, we've adopted, I'll say I've adopted a very conservative approach as it relates to fine revenue. And we purposely aim low. It's a uncertain revenue stream. If tomorrow a variety of folks decide that they're going to drive more cautiously and improve the safety in our community, then there would be less revenue. So when we put together the budget, we purposely aim low. And
I understand that, but what I'm talking about here is the expenditure, not the revenue, which it seems is or not necessarily correlated from what I'm hearing.
They are correlated within, I think, within reason. The variance is not that great. We certainly can put together information for the council on the number of lookups versus the number of tickets issued. If that would help the council understand the program better.
That's one issue, but a second issue is that it doesn't seem to be effective, and we're essentially using our residents as an ATM just to generate revenue. I've actually studied these sorts of contracts that state and local governments have pretty extensively, and almost every case they're a raw deal for the community. And I just hope we have some strict oversight of our programs as well, because I'm not sure we're getting a benefit out of this one.
Councilmember Siddiq?
Yeah, I'm going to push back real hard on that. Let me be really clear. Speed limits are important. Red lights are important. Stop breaking the law. The problem is we've got a lot of people, particularly after the pandemic, who've decided, let's break the law. It puts our residents at risk. Now, some of those people are in fact not worthy of pursuing a ticket. Perhaps they have other issues going on, like Deputy Chief Turner said, but to have cameras that identify potential violations of street law, it's entirely appropriate to take those pictures, send them to the police, and have a judgment made on whether or not we ought to pursue a fine on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Siddiq. Any additional comments or questions from the council? This is all about the budget, and I'm happy to discuss the speed camera program overall. It is difficult to run an experiment to see what the effect of this is, and so, you know, we can't put the same 100,000 drivers a day through town and just measure their speed one day and measure their speed with a speed camera another day. Same 100,000, same road conditions, same hurry that people are getting to work and so on, and let it know. But I do know when I'm driving on East-West Highway or the other places where we have speed cameras that I see a lot of taillights go on before we get to them. And yes, people tend to speed up a little bit afterwards, but they tend to speed up, in my experience, less than they were going before the cameras. So that's what I've seen, and I trust that my observations are correct. But I'm happy to hear and discuss any other ways to get at the problem of, is this an effective thing to do? And as Assistant Chief, Deputy Chief Turner said, it does appear to be reducing the number of accidents, which is a highly correlated, or serious accidents, which is highly correlated with speed. Okay. Are there any public comments on the discussion item amendment of the fiscal year 2023 budget? Okay. Thank you all for that discussion. Let's move on to discussion item 3, Town of Riverville Park Station infrastructure transfer.
Director Lewis.
Yes, thank you. And good evening again, Mayor and Council. Were you saying something, Town Manager?
I was just a quick introductory comment. I want to commend Ivy for her work on this. In your packet tonight, you have some draft documents. Ivy has had quite a few hours in this. We understand it's been over a long period of time, but she has navigated every twist and turn with grace and with stamina. I think we're going to end up with a really good product because of her good work. So, Director Lewis.
Thank you for that, Mr. Town Manager. We're not requesting any action this evening. Instead, we want to acquaint you with the documents involved in the transfer of infrastructure in Riverdale Park Station to the town, and to review the schedule for council action on the acceptance ordinance. The infrastructure we're talking about is divided into two categories. It might help to show the parcel and ownership map. I think it's there. The first category is land. No, you can leave it on the map. Thank you. The first category, again, what's transferring to the town is divided into two categories. The first is land dedicated to public use or identified as right-of-way on the approved plat of subdivision in Calvert Track. And all of the improvements within this right-of-way will include roads, curb and gutters, tree box areas, street trees, street lights, and all street name and traffic control signs and sidewalks. The right-of-way is shown in gray on the parcel and ownership map. This group includes all roads except Underwood Street from Route 1 to the Whole Foods parking lot. It is actually platted as a private street and not transferring to the town. And Woodbury, east of 47th Street, adjacent to the playground, and 46th Street, south of Van Buren. Both of these are paved roads, not transferring to the town. The dedicated rights-of-way on the improved plats exclude all paved surfaces behind the curb on streets with commercial development. For example, on Woodbury Street, the right-of-way extends from the back of the sidewalk on the north side of the street, adjacent to the townhomes. And on the commercial side of Woodbury, the right-of-way extends to the back of curb. On the side of Woodbury, this includes the sidewalk, trees, and all street furniture. This exclusion, of course, applies to streets with commercial uses on both sides of the street. And for the purpose of definition, the pilot house is considered commercial. So on that side of Woodbury, the right-of-way ends at the curb line. The second category includes street lights, street light control boxes, street names, and traffic control signs within the public utility easements throughout the development. And the public utility easements are represented in the red strips that you see on this map. Those easement areas are throughout the community. Are there any questions at this point? Because it's a little confusing at times to distinguish between the right-of-way that extends beyond the sidewalk as opposed to the right-of-way that ends at the curb. Okay. In total, the town has taken on 1.6 miles of paved roads, 5,732 linear feet of sidewalks, 167 street lights, 18 of them have dual lamps, the rest are single, 5 street light control boxes, and about 210 street trees, though that number might be lower, according to an email I received this evening from the developer confirming that none of the trees in the commercial areas are transferring to the town. There are 4 transfer documents. The deed of dedication will transfer all of the right-of-way in fee simple to the town. There's the infrastructure transfer agreement and bill of sales, which will transfer ownership of streetlights, streetlight control boxes, and street name and traffic control signs within the public utility easements. There's the conveyance of easement rights, which actually gives the town the authority to enter into the public utility areas or easement areas for the purpose of accessing and maintaining the infrastructure that the town will own. And the 4th document is the acceptance ordinance. If approved by council, will accept the infrastructure conveyed to the town by Calvert Track and related entities. The acceptance ordinance will be on the council agenda for introduction on May 1st, and at the special legislative session scheduled on May 22nd, the ordinance will be on the agenda for council action. And with that, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Councilmember Smith.
Wow. Here we are, Miss Lewis. Thank you for all the work you've done on this and all of the other staff. I know it's been a huge effort. I know I haven't always been the most patient about it. I assure you that you've gotten less from me than I've gotten from the constituents, as is their prerogative. This took entirely too long and not for any reasons that our staff could have addressed. So just thank you for this again. It'll be nice to be able to hand off a RPS where we own the streets and the infrastructure to a new council member as that area shifts to a new ward after June. So just thank you for all of your work on that, and thanks for finally getting us to a place where we can work on these roads for these residents and make sure that RPS is a safe community for everybody.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Siddiq.
Circling back to our earlier discussion about election signs, looking at this map, everything in gray would be eligible for election signs. Is that correct?
I could say those are the public streets. They would be, yeah. And so whatever the policy or regulation
green
ultimately
sections.
is, it would impact those streets.
All the green sections would be eligible. Is that correct?
I'm not certain about that.
Are those public right of ways?
I don't believe
So yeah, so parcel G is the village green. That is not transferring. So let me just clarify, the utility strips are actually those red strips on the map. It doesn't include the land within those boundaries, just within those strips.
Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just clarify that none of these areas would be impacted by the legislation we passed earlier this evening, since that legislation will expire before this transfer is complete.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please.
Director Lewis, you said the trees are not transferring to the town.
Within the public right of way,
Right.
that area from back of sidewalk to back of curb, those trees are transferring. So basically the trees fronting the townhomes are transferring. Everything else that's within the commercial area are not transferring. And that's the developer's preference, to maintain responsibility for the trees in the commercial areas. We've sort of been back and forth about that almost from the beginning, but they've clarified just today that those trees are not transferring. So that 210 will probably decrease by about 45 to 50%.
So for discussion's sake, we're looking at what's being conveyed is approximately 105 trees.
Approximately, yes.
And the other 105 trees, we have no authority, responsibility, or liability for.
That's right.
Okay. So in the event of a major weather event and trees in that commercial area go down, who's clearing them? Because they will be falling on the streets, possibly, that have conveyed to us.
That's true. That's a very good point.
How does that get coordinated then? I mean, because it's their tree.
It is their tree.
Now,
So
are we
likewise,
going by go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, if a tree on private property today falls in the public right of way, it is our responsibility to remove it. So it would be the same in this instance.
Okay, so it's up to the town to remove a tree that is owned by a private entity.
And if I could clarify, we remove it off our right of way. We will not go beyond our right of way to remove a tree at grade. So,
Right.
so if
Okay.
someone's tree falls down, we'll cut it off at our sidewalk. If it came through their fence or across their yard, that's on them, but we'll clear our right of way.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yet that's happening at our expense.
Yes.
Yes, sir. And, case law with trees, there's very interesting.
I know. know.
If it's a healthy tree, if it's a green tree,
Define healthy.
then it's on whoever's property it falls on.
Right.
It-
Define
it-
healthy.
Yeah, exactly, sir. But if it's an obviously dead tree, then you can have some recourse. Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Lingua, if I might respond to your question.
Oh,
there-
go right ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So I certainly on my property have two trees that are just inside the town's right of way, and I'm sure that if either of them went over in a storm, at least in the direction towards the street, that they would be significantly blocking the street, if not completely blocking the street. And so this is a hazard that the town has dealt with for many years from residents' trees.
Oh, no, I agree. And I know there have been occasions where trees of the town, that were in the town right of way, fell onto private property.
Hmm.
And yet still the town took care of them. Even though according to Mr. Listitian, by case law, tree falls onto your property, it's your tree.
That's correct.
But there have been instances where owners have rebutted that and requested that the town take care of it, and the town is obliged.
Yes, and that is more about providing
About providing
Going
the service to the
beyond.
taxpaying public, yes.
exactly.
Yes, I understand that. Hence, this is my concern here is because now here it is. We have an entity saying, okay, you can have some of the trees, but not all the trees. And any of the trees that are on, that are by commercial properties, we're going to take care of. I think, however we are able, it might be prudent for the town to review the extent to, the review that responsibility, liability, and authority equation and see if any of those can be redelineated so it's less of a burden upon the town to address a private tree should it fall into the public right of way.
Okay. I'm not sure of exactly what where you're heading, but we can.
Well, it's essentially we have no authority over the tree,
Mhm.
okay? But yet yet the responsibility will fall on the town should it fall into a public right of way.
Which is the situation that we have right now for
Okay,
privately owned trees.
yet the liability is kind of still up in the air. Well, whose liability is it then? Who's covering that cost then?
Well, if the tree falls into one of the commercial buildings,
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm talking about falling into the public right of way. I'm falling it's blocking a street. If it falls onto a commercial building, then of course it's obvious who's going to have to deal with it. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning it up? Who's going to foot that bill?
Mhm.
I'm saying if we have an entity here saying, nope, we'll take care of the tree. Okay, does that mean then when that tree falls in the street, you're going to be out there taking care of it, getting it removed, and you're going to foot that bill? Or are you just going to say, oh, trees in the street, go ahead, town, take care of it. Sorry.
So do you want to? I mean, this is going to require renegotiating the agreement.
Well, I think we can, is it possible to, essentially, agree, reach this agreement and, let them know that, we, with the caveat that, we're going to be looking at, this one condition about, about defining, responsibility, authority, and liability, in the event, that a tree is toppled, due to a weather event.
So I will point out that the trees that have fallen from private property or even public property are a lot larger than the trees will ultimately be in this community.
Okay.
I would also venture to say, I've gotten to know Mark Regalinsky pretty well over the last year, and I would expect, and Lydia Chandler, frankly, she's the on-site manager. I think they'll move pretty quickly to address the issue.
True.
Ultimately, as you're pointing out, if they don't, and it's within the public right of way, the town will have to. I would also suspect that if one of their trees falls on a vehicle, for example, that they're liable for that and not the town.
Okay.
So I guess unless there's an issue, we probably won't have a lot of problems with how they respond to something like that, because it's in their best interest to address it and quickly.
And that's all quite possible. And about, the folks that you mentioned, it's all well and true. I've met with them. They're good, decent people. However, an agreement like this is going to outlast their tenure. And at that point, we do not know who we would be, working with at that point. That's one concern I have.
Are there additional concerns? Mr. Inyang has his hand raised, if you would allow him to speak. Councilmember Lingua, are you done for the moment?
Yeah, I'm pretty much done for the moment.
Okay, Mr. Inyang?
Thank you. First, Director Lewis, I appreciate you taking this over the finish line as a member of this community. This is coming up on 6 years of sort of this transfer, and it almost doesn't feel real. I'll celebrate when it actually passes in a month's time or so. I think in terms of the actual conversation that's happening, my one question is, I know a lot of the focus has been on what happens if a tree falls over. I think the community's biggest concern is what happens when trees fall sick or ill, right? Which is something that happened a lot in the community, not it actually falling over into the right of way. I think the concern of who cuts it down and sort of clears the street is one thing, but who replaces the tree, who maintains the tree on an ongoing basis is the thing that actually keeps people up at night, and it's a bigger concern. And hearing earlier about I think Councilmember Ling was concerned about the amount of money budgeted for tree health. I think the ability to offset half the trees in this property, so that'd be part of the developer's purview, I think is probably a win for the town, and not sort of increasing the cost and sort of only thinking about the downside of what happens if it falls, but what happens if a pesticide, or what happens if a particular strain happens, or if there's a drought like it was a couple of years ago where a lot of the trees struggled and a lot of trees were replaced as a result that the developer did. So that would just be my own point. And then I think that the second would just be to be completely clear. We are at the to use a football analogy, we are in the red zone, we are on the 1 yard line, and for this to be delayed for any reason, I think would be I would hate to imagine what would happen with the community. I think we've been patiently thinking about this. We've been told this was going to happen 4 years ago, and here we are now. There've been 2 different presidents since this first talked about. I think the idea that like, let's get this through the line should be the number one focus and then should not be derailed for any moment. And I agree that, you know, the residents, you know, the people that we deal with, we have a good relationship with. You know, I know Mark well, I know Lydia really well. You know, whoever they pass this on is, you know, you want to think about set that outclass them, but you know, it's been a long 6 years. So I appreciate again, you know, Director Lewis, the work that you've done. I know I've been, when Councilmember Smith talked about people giving him a hard time, I know I've been kind of first on that list, and we've exchanged some heated emails too. So just thank you again for your work on this. I really appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments on this?
Mr.
Councilmember?
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, please.
I don't think in any point in time that I can, you know, did I say in any way that I would want this delayed, held up, or anything like that. My concern is that on this issue, while I can see that we can go ahead and pass this, that this, you know, it's to make it aware to Mr. Regulinski and company, is that we are looking at this, that we do have concerns with this, and that we're going to probably come back to them and want to talk to them about this more at length. But in no way am I construing that this should be held up for any reason.
Okay. Thank you. Are there additional council or public comments on this item? I have a question, and I just want to understand it. If whoever's controlling the screen could zoom in a little bit more, yeah, on that intersection of Rhode Island and Van Buren, but not too much more. So just zoom in just a little bit. Perfect. Okay, there are a bunch of different street lights there. The little red dots are street lights.
They are.
So there's red dots that are in the gray zone, which is gotten by the town. So in front of the townhouses, at the top of parcel G, for instance, and there are 4 dots there, those on the bottom, those 3 ones on the bottom. So those are going to be town owned and maintained streetlights. Over on Van Buren Street in the central median strip, parcel BBB as it's labeled, there are 4 streetlights. Those are going to be maintained by the commercial property owners. Is that correct?
Actually, all of the streetlights, except for those within property deeded to Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and that are within the state right of way, will be the town's responsibility, with
Okay,
those
so-
exceptions. Exactly.
Okay. So the streetlights along Rhode Island on the western side of Rhode Island that are in the is that purple hashed zone, those will be maintained by MNC PPC, but pretty much all the others are going to be town streetlights.
Actually, let me clarify it further. So that strip is actually a trail easement for MNC PPC and WSSC. We believe or are discussing those transferring to the town. I've actually reached out to Park and Planning again today to have a sit down and get their understanding of what their responsibility is. Further to the south, if you can move the map southward, south of, I guess it would be near Underwood, where you see the top of this brown area at the bottom. Here you see parcel X. That parcel V has been deeded to MNC PPC. They own that and all of the improvements.
Okay.
And so, you know, we have a MOU with MNC PPC for the trail south of Wells Run. And so I've talked to them multiple times about the need to update that to include the trail within Riverdale Park Station. But again, in parcel V, MNC PPC owns the street lights, and the trail easement to the north of that, they won't. Those will convey to the town, which is how it's currently identified in the transfer document.
Okay. So I think I understand it. Understand the situation, and I just wanted to make sure of that. So thank you for that that clarification.
It's a little confusing there that they didn't deed the near parcel X sign to MNC PPC, but instead established an easement for their access.
And so we can also, we have an easement to be able to access the property in order, for the commercial property, for instance, in order to service the streetlights should they need it.
Right, within the PUEs.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? Okay, let's move on to discussion item 4, 54th place, removal of deed restriction.
Director Shelton, if you can lead us through this update.
I could be wrong, but I believe the member of the public, Mr. Ifiak, raised his hand. Is
Oh,
that?
did I miss that again? I'm sorry, I had a document open and couldn't see the list.
I won't take it too personal. My only question was just around the town, the sidewalk. So I was surprised to see that the sidewalks are also being transferred over to the town. I thought that sidewalks like that faced like the town homes for HOA property, but I guess I'm incorrect, right? That the town is taking over the maintenance of those sidewalks.
That's correct. The sidewalks are not within the HOA property.
Okay, and
They're
that
part of the
includes,
the platted public right of way.
okay, I thought it was just the curb, the little tree box in between the curb and then stopping at the sidewalk. You're saying it actually goes, including that, through the sidewalk. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, well, I will convey that to, we have a reserve study that's sort of factoring in replacing sidewalks in 5 years. And I guess that's no longer needed, so.
Really,
Okay.
you did remind me of something else. The street lights that are shown around the village green do not currently exist. They have not been installed. They will be in the future, and they will also be transferred to the town, as will any street lights around the 2 vacant parcels on the east side of the development or southeast section of the development.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Inyang, I'm looking very carefully at your name in the list and don't see a hand up there, so.
I'm all done. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to discussion item 4, 54th place, removal of deed restrictions.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council, members of the public. We've spoken about this project a little bit beforehand, but as a reminder, the town owns land which will be used for the 54th Place Pocket Park, which is currently an alleyway just 1 block east of 54th Avenue. This 54th Place currently has a deed restriction requiring the land to be used as a public alley. And the town attorney, Mr. Sussman, has suggested 4 steps to navigate this restriction. The 4 steps are shown here: to draft an ordinance to abandon the use of 54th Place as a public alley, to attempt to contact the heirs of the original grantors, and to conduct a public hearing as part of the ordinance adoption process, and providing the ordinance is adopted, move forward with the project after the effective date of the ordinance. Staff have attempted to contact the heirs and have drafted an ordinance which is attached to this cover memo. Additionally, there's a public hearing notice has been created as part of the ordinance adoption process. And I'm happy to answer any questions about where we are in this process or the ordinance that's included along with the meeting materials here tonight.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Council members, any questions or comments? Okay, I think we've discussed this in the past, and I think we understand this is the start of a extended process, not too long, hopefully a lot shorter than the transfer of the infrastructure has been. So see how it goes. Any comments from members of the public? checking for your hand, Mr. Inyang. I'm not seeing it, so I'm gonna move on to the next item. Okay, next item, ordinance 2023-OR-04 regarding chapter 75 stormwater management.
Mr. Shelton again.
Yes, good evening again. Yes, this item is the ordinance regarding the stormwater management requirement, I guess the inspection requirement for the protection of renters within town. So as a part of our rental licensing process, applicants will be required to have their property reviewed by an engineer, a professional engineer, to confirm that or to see what type of improvements are required in order to prevent damage occurring to the property in the event of a flood. I mentioned before that we have a number of programs to help with owners of properties who have flood damage problems, such as the emergency repair grant, but we didn't really have anything in place for those who were renting. And so the idea behind this ordinance and this new requirement is to protect those who are just leasing space within town. And as a complement to this, the staff is working on a grant program to assist with the cost of hiring an engineer to come out and inspect and review and evaluate the properties included in the licensing process. That we are expecting to have that grant program revised and shown to the mayor and council before the end of the fiscal year. So there should be plenty of time before applicants are required to have the evaluation done. If there are any questions regarding this ordinance or the grant program I just mentioned, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Council members, are there any questions about stormwater management? Okay, members of the public, any comments or questions? Okay, so this will come before us on May 2nd for adoption. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6. Discussion item 6, sidewalk cafe standards.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. The staff has been busy working on the updated sidewalk cafe guidelines. During the last meeting, the Mayor and Council members of the public expressed that they'd like to see in the new standards. Councilmember Lingle mentioned that maintaining accessibility along the sidewalk would be a priority or should be a priority for the program. And the guidelines provided require that sidewalk cafes areas maintain a minimum of 5 feet of unobstructed sidewalk space for pedestrians in order to account for this. Additionally, the guidelines require participants to submit a certificate of liability insurance, naming the town as additionally insured. The updated sidewalk cafe guidelines also more specifically address the areas eligible for use. The cafe area cannot be in front of a neighboring business or the business, basically can't be in front of the neighboring business. So it would be as if there were lines drawn directly perpendicular to the business frontage to, if there's neighboring businesses on either side, it would be so that you can't cross over into that area. Those were the major updates to the guidelines, but if there are any questions on the guidelines or any of the other components for the sidewalk cafe program, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Council members? Any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please.
Director Shelton, just so you know, that I make sure I understand it. You're saying that the guidelines here are ADA compliant.
That's correct. Yes, they would require that the sidewalk area and any area improved here and be or used be ADA compliant. That's correct.
Right. Thank you.
So, what are the concern? This is going to be an annual agreement, an annually renewed agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And so basically, if the town found that the space was not being effectively used, for instance, then we could decide to not grant them the license for the next year.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And you said that the license would be only for property that was directly in front of the establishment. And did you give any consideration to an agreement between an establishment that wanted sidewalk standards and adjacent business that was not interested in taking advantage of this program, and whether there could be some arrangement of that sort? I know it complicates things, but I just wanted to know about the thought process.
Yes, we had considered that a little bit. The concern was that if the neighboring business left and that space was still being used as a sidewalk cafe, it might be the new business that came in may not want to have that same type of agreement. And so we're still open to something like that, but like you mentioned, it is complicating things a little bit.
Okay, and are you? I saw some statements in the drafts about, or in the explanatory statement about there being a schedule more or less in the middle of winter when the area would be cleared. And so the question is, do you anticipate running this program in the long haul, once we reach a sort of steady state? So I can understand we might start at mid-cycle, but running this on an annual cycle, similar to other licensing agreements that we have?
Yes, I think so. Yes, that would be the plan. Absolutely.
Okay. And so the way we could get around that, if there were an agreement between adjacent businesses, is that the agreements would only extend for, the current cycle. That would be one easy way to do it. There might be a better way to do it, but that would be an easy way to do it.
And if I could chime in on this, Mr. Mayor, I really think it gets complicated. Because you can have different building owners, and they can have different tenants and different plans and different recruitment strategies to fill vacant spaces. And I think that a building owner would have to be party to any agreement, not just the tenant.
Sure.
And I don't know if a building owner is going to sign away their ability to recruit a business that would want to use a sidewalk cafe area. And having a different business operating in front of another business, I just think it puts the town in a mix that the juice may not be worth the squeeze. And we certainly can explore whether others have successfully done this, but entering into 3- and 4-party agreements is going to get complicated.
Yeah, I can understand that. I appreciate the discussion of the thought process that went into it, because I haven't thought about it, and I just wanted to know what thought process you had gone through. But I can understand that. I'll continue to think about it a little bit, but I can see that it could get very messy and very complicated, and we also sort of wouldn't want to encourage a property owner who had that space to basically have some side agreement where they were sort of renting town space that happen to be in front of their property to their next door neighbor. And thereby making money off of a public, without us necessarily being involved. So understood. Councilmember Smith, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, would this, these standards, I'm just wondering because it specifically says sidewalk, would these standards allow for use of the parallel parking spaces in town center as sidewalk cafe space?
This does extend to include parking spaces beyond the sidewalk. But again, those, I guess it can't branch out too far laterally from the business to cover spaces that might be used by other businesses, neighboring businesses, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any additional council questions? Any public comments or questions? Okay. I think would like to take a little bit more time to look these over and think about some of the issues I brought up tonight, but I look forward to moving fairly quickly on this. So depending on whether I can't sleep at some point in the middle of the night, then maybe early in May we can start to move towards creating this program. So sounds good. Okay, any final comments before we move on? I don't see any hands up, so I'm moving on. Okay. Next item is item 7, welcome signage options.
Yes, good evening again. Staff have been working with town engineering firm, contracted town engineering firm Pannoni to survey and create some draft designs for potential welcome signage to replace our existing welcome signage. So I would like to take a moment to share those designs and to get some feedback on what we like, or what the mayor and council and public like about the designs, and what should be changed about the proposed designs. Okay, I zoomed in a little too far. Well, maybe not. So the first one here is at Kenilworth South by Campus Drive and Good Look Road. So the existing sign here is this smaller pole sign. The replacement would be a monument sign, either of, and I'll zoom in a little bit on these. So a monument sign with brick on either side, and then with the town's name in the middle with a space for a seal. I'd like to also note that we are taking into account the town seal redesign, and so we've expressed to Pannoni that we are likely going to need to have not this exact seal, but maybe a different seal, or at least the ability to update the seal, and so they are aware of that, and so they've incorporated that into their designs. This is the second design that they've provided for this location. They're very similar, I guess, then that it has the brick siding, but this time it is a black background with the gold lettering. So this is
Director Shelton,
yes.
Is the difference in price, as a substantial difference in price, just the difference in size? Is that the main thing driving it? So we could, at least in principle, have a large sign with the same coloring as option 1?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
But similar price to option 2 if we wanted to go. So, okay.
I believe we would be able to have a similar, yes. The second location is further south along Kenilworth Avenue. And this is the sign that currently exists in the spot today. Pannoni believes we'd be able to put another monument sign in here, and this is the same blue sign that was shown above, but this is a slightly closer version of that sign. And I'm happy to go back to the photos when we have some questions or discussion about the signs. So the next location is East-West Highway along the eastern boundary of the municipal boundary, and they again believe that we can fit another monument sign here where there is currently a pole sign along with a small plant. The next option is on Good Luck Road. We currently have a pole sign here, and there is not enough room for a monument sign here, but they've designed for our review a pole sign here that has the name of the town and space for a seal on the bottom. And this would be on, well, this picture in particular is on Good Luck Road on the eastern edge of the municipal boundary, but we have many signs like this throughout the town boundaries. The last location is on Baltimore Avenue, just north of Riverdale Park Station. And it would be facing south, I guess. So Riverdale Park Station would be on the left. And this would be another pole sign that would be for the town of Riverdale Park here at this location. So, yes, I'm happy to hear any comments or suggestions regarding the designs. And yes.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Councilmember Siddiq.
Any ideas on what the maintenance would be required on the larger signs on Kenilworth? They look like they would collect debris and need to be cleaned periodically.
I think they would need to be cleaned periodically, but I don't have specifics on the maintenance. I can certainly find that out from Panoni.
It would seem like it could become a driving factor in cost.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. Councilmember Lingua, please go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding that second sign you showed, that's on a pole with the revised edition, the one you were showing. No. There you go.
Sorry.
Nope. Go back. There you go. A little higher. There you go. Looks strikingly similar to the College Park sign. And College Park has laid claim to that black and gold type look. But that's easy enough to adjust. I like the look of the sign, the design of it. Just would need to probably go with a different type of color combo on that. That's my thought. So, the monument signs, yeah, kind of in the same. I had the same question as Councilmember Siddiq. So.
If I might ask, do you have any suggested color combinations, Councilmember Lingua?
Oh, gosh, well, we're what? We've been working with blue and gold for past however long. Blue gold and with white inlay. Probably something akin to that. Probably, I know the gold that College Park uses is a little bit different than the gold that we use. Differentiation could be looked along there. It could also be looked along, in terms of what the background is, as opposed to being a black background up there, it could be a white background or a lighter color background, or work with that, is the gold color with the black trim for the frame. Any number of ideas, just so that there's a bit more of a visual differentiation between the town sign versus, as compared to College Parks, yet still working with a sufficient contrast where needed so that it's readily readable. Hard to say to like give like exact colors and stuff without exact tone squares in front of me to really be looking at.
Mr. Mayor, if I can ask Mr. Shelton to do something.
Please.
Mr. Shelton, if you could work with Pannoni and come up with like 3 different color schemes that would differentiate from College Park, and we can bring those back to the mayor and council.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Does that meet the goal of the council, Mr. Mayor, as it relates to the color scheme?
I believe so. I believe that would help us. Councilmember Sadiq, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I just want to point out you're right across the street from Parkdale. Perhaps we could use Parkdale's colors, which are actually green and gold, but a greener green and a golder gold.
Then you're starting to look like Edmonston.
It's Parkdale.
It's also an unincorporated Riverdale.
So that was my question, is that at least a few of these signs are not actually within the town's boundaries, as I believe they exist right now. The last one, on Baltimore Avenue north of Riverdale Park Station, I think even has like the University Park Town Hall is very near there. And so I'm wondering if they're going to let us put one there.
They're on the other side of the street. Too bad for them.
And your point's well taken, Mr. Mayor. We would make sure that all the signs are within the town, or that we have agreements with the neighboring jurisdictions if we're right on the border.
Okay, very good.
Isn't it the
one other-
expectation to have the signs within town property?
Did you hear
Within the
question?
municipal boundaries?
Did you hear the question, Mr. Town Manager?
So I can answer this a little bit.
Okay.
This particular location is also a tricky one because as everybody knows, the eastern side of Baltimore Avenue here is within town. But if you're driving along the road, if we had the sign on the eastern side, it would only be as you're leaving, as you're heading north. And so if you're entering town, you'd be heading south and facing the side of the road that's shown here with the rendering. And that's why the rendering is showing a sign here. So that's part of the dilemma here, and why it would be easier to have it just on the town side, on the eastern side. It would only show as you're exiting town.
Any additional comments, Councilmember Berlinguer?
Leaving town, entering town. Gosh, why don't we just go back to the old stones that they used at Riversdale? The big RP carved into them, and just leave it at that. Have them face straight out to the street, but let those stones be the boundary markers.
Okay. One other statement is that the not the monument signs, the pole signs just mark the boundary and don't have a welcome to. And I'm guessing that it was hard to make it fit in and look good, because I know that was true for the existing signs. And so I'll just note that this is just saying this is the town of Riverdale Park and not welcome. The monument signs have the welcome to. So
I can include that in my request to Panoni when we have some more redesigns to see how that would look.
okay. Any additional council comments? Any public comments? Mr. Inyang?
I guess I'm curious in terms of like the monument signs about like graffiti deterrence. I know there's been some issues with graffitiing, so I don't know if like the materials, if it matters with the colors. I'd sort of look into that as well. And then is there a preference or like a rationale between the smaller versus larger sign? Did they say anything about, you know, it looks like the one on Kenilworth Avenue where it's a pretty wide median. Yeah, that where it's a pretty big section. A bigger one might seem more appropriate. So is it more like relative to where it's placed, or, you know, most towns should have the same one all across?
I believe that was Panoni's intention when providing two different monument signs here. They were thinking that this is a pretty large median in Kenilworth Avenue, and that it would therefore fit a much larger monument sign.
But
thank you.
But I think the intention is whatever sign is selected as a monument sign, we would have that same monument sign, maybe a different scale, but that same monument sign throughout. We would not have different designs of monument signs.
Got it. Thank you.
Any additional comments before we move on? Okay. I think we'll see some interested to see the updates from the engineering firm, design firm. Next item on the agenda is minutes. Please review the minutes and provide any needed changes to town staff. Let them know what's up. Any changes? Usually find that they're quite accurate. So, but just in case, I want to be sure you got it right. That brings us to new business. Are there any items of new business to discuss? Not seeing any hands raised or microphones opened. Are there any items of unfinished business that need to be discussed? Again, I'm not seeing anything, so give you 5 seconds for somebody to do something. 3, 2, 1. Let's adjourn. Thank you all. Very lively meeting. See you all at Election Day next week. Take care.